The last Sunday of Advent and the frost on the steps of St. Anselm's in Harkwood had not softened all morning. The congregation came down them in a slow, bright river. Furs and beaver hats, and the click of pattens on stone, and the woman kneeling at the bottom of the flight did not move out of their way, because she could not. Her name was Roseanne Talbot, and she was 24 years old, and she had been on those steps since before the bells. She wore a gray stuff gown that had been dyed twice, and would not take a third dye. Her mantle was borrowed from a woman who had died in November. Her boots had been mended at the heel with waxed thread, and the thread had gone through. To the parish of Harkwood, she was the pauper girl at the church door, and the parish had decided this about her some weeks ago, and had not troubled to revisit the decision. Mrs. Lydia Fenwick came down the steps last, as she always did, so that she might be seen coming down them. She paused at the bottom. She looked at Roseanne the way one looks at a stain on a carpet one is not obliged to clean. "The pauper girl at the church door," she said to her sister, not lowering her voice at all. "Every Sunday." One begins to think she enjoys the attention. Roseanne kept her eyes on the stone. Her hands were folded in her lap and inside her closed right hand, pressed into the palm hard enough to leave a mark she would find. That evening was a ring. It was gold and heavy, and the seal on its face was a hawk on a broken tower. She had held it for 11 days. She had not sold it, though a ring like that would have bought her a year of bread and a room with a door. She had not shown it to anyone. She had sat with it closed in her fist on the coldest steps in Harkwood, while the parish walked past her and told each other what she was, and she had waited for the man it belonged to come and find it, because she had promised a dying woman that she would put it into his hand and no other. She did not know yet that he was already in the churchyard. She did not know that he had been standing beside the yew for a quarter of an hour, quite still, watching her not move. The bells stopped. The last of the congregation thinned, and a shadow fell across the stone in front of her knees, and stayed. "Stand up," a man's voice said. It was not a request, and it was not kind. It was level and low, and it came from somewhere above her, and Roseanne, who had been given orders by better-dressed people all autumn, felt something in her spine, object before her reason could catch it. She stood up. Her knees had gone past aching into a sort of glassy numbness, and she swayed once and caught herself on the iron rail. He was tall, and he wore a dark blue coat cut close, and his hair was black and very short and pushed back off a high forehead. And there was a thin, pale scar at the left corner of his mouth that pulled slightly when his jaw set. His jaw was set. Now he was perhaps 35. He looked at her the way a man looks at a ledger. He has been told, adds up, and suspects, does not. "You have been here since 7, he said. "Yes, my lord." "Your grace," said the woman at his elbow quietly. And Roseanne's stomach turned over. She had never in her life stood within arm's reach of a duke. The Duke of Harkwood was a name that arrived in the village as weather arrives, as a thing that happened to the roads and the rents. He was a name that had been in mourning for 2 years and had not been seen at the winter assembly, and did not, the village agreed, care for company. He was looking at her, closed right hand. "Open it," he said, and Roseanne, who had rehearsed this moment for 11 days in every draughty corner she had slept in, found that her mouth would not work at all. You will want to stay for what happened next. It is the reason the whole parish talked of nothing else by 12th night. Her fingers were too cold to unbend cleanly. She had to use her left hand to open her right, and she did it slowly, and the gold came up out of her palm with the frost print of it still stamped red in the skin, and she held it out on her flat hand in the gray December light. The Duke of Harkwood did not take it. He looked at it for a long moment. His face did not change. His hand at his side closed once and opened again, and that was all. And Roseanne, watching him with the whole of her attention, because she had nothing else left to spend, saw it, and did not know what it meant. "Where did you get this?" he said. "It was given to me." By whom? By a woman who is dead. His breath went out of him. It was a small thing. It was the smallest thing. It was the sort of thing a person standing 3 feet farther away would not have seen at all. Her name, he said. She did not give me her name. She gave me yours. Behind him on the path, Mrs. Fenwick had stopped walking. Her sister had stopped walking. The verger locking the north door had stopped locking it. The churchyard of St. Anselm's had, in the space of half a minute, become an audience. "Come with me," the Duke said. "Your Grace, that was Mrs. Fenwick," arriving at his shoulder in a rustle of wool, her face arranged into concern the way a table is arranged for dinner. "Your Grace, forgive me. That girl has been begging at this door for 2 months. Whatever she has told you, she has told a great many people, a great many things. She has told me nothing," he said. He had not turned around. "She has said 11 words. He looked at Roseanne. His eyes were a pale gray that took the color of the sky and gave nothing back. "Come with me," he said again. "You are perished." She went. She could not afterward entirely account for why. She told herself it was the ring, and the promise, and the fact that she had nowhere else to be. All of that was true. None of it explained the way her heart had gone loud in her throat at the 2 words he had said last, which were the first 2 words anyone in Harkwood had said to her in 11 days, that had her body in them rather than her character. The carriage was black with the hawk on the door. She had passed it 100 times on the Ledbury Road, without ever imagining the inside of it. The inside of it was warm. There was a brick wrapped in flannel on the floor. He put it under her feet with his own hand, and did not comment on it, and did not look at her while he did it, and then he sat opposite her with his gloves in his lap, and said nothing at all for 2 miles. Roseanne had been the daughter of a gentleman. Her father had held the living at Ledbury for 19 years and had taught her Latin because there was no one else in the house to teach it to. When he died in the spring, the living went to a young man from Oxford with a wife and an opinion about the parish's music. And the young man was perfectly civil, and the house was not hers. And there was £70 of debt against her father's name that nobody had mentioned to her while he was alive. £70. She had learned the figure from a solicitor in Ledbury who had said it the way one says the weather. She had sold the pianoforte for 18. She had sold her mother's garnets for 11. She had sold the books last because they were the hardest, and they had brought 9. And after all of it, there were £32 standing against her still, and no more house to sell things out of. That was the wound, and it was not the money. It was the discovery made across 4 months and a great many rooms that a woman of no fortune is not a person with a difficulty. She is a difficulty. Everyone in Ledbury had been very sorry. Nobody had had a room. She had walked to Harkwood in October because the almshouse there took women who could read. And the almshouse there was full. And on the 3rd of December, in a lane behind the tannery where the wind came off the river, she had found a woman lying against a wall with her boots gone and her hands blue and a gold ring pressed under her tongue where thieves would not think to look. "He will not want it," the woman had said. "Give it to him anyway. Harkwood, the hawk. Say it was Hetty." She had died at some point before the bells rang 4. Roseanne had sat with her until the parish came because there had been nobody else to sit with her, and when the parish came she had not mentioned the ring because the parish would have taken it and asked her afterward where she had stolen it. The carriage turned in at gates she had never gone through. "Your name," the Duke said. "Roseanne Talbot." He did not repeat it. His eyes had gone to the window, and stayed there. In the gray light, his profile was a hard, clean line, and the scar at his mouth was white, and his hand, resting on his knee, was not entirely steady, and Roseanne looked at that hand for longer than she should have, and then looked at the flannel brick under her feet instead. Ardennes was not a house, it was a proposition. 3 stories of gray stone in a shallow valley, a lime avenue going up to it, a lake below it with ice at the edges, and a heron standing in the reeds not caring at all who owned the water. Roseanne got down out of the carriage in her twice-dyed gown and her mended boots, and stood in the gravel court of a place that had 30 windows on the front of it, and understood that she had made an error, and that the error was not correctable now. The housekeeper was called Mrs. Prentice, and she was 60, and she had gray wool hair and hands like a farmer, and she took one look at Roseanne, and did not look at the Duke for instruction, which told Roseanne something about how long Mrs. Prentice had been at Ardennes. "Ante. Kitchen," Mrs. Prentice said. "Now, before we have the doctor out for nothing. Mrs. Prentice, your Grace, she is gray to the lips, and you may ask her your questions when she has had something hot in her, and not one moment before." He inclined his head about a quarter of an inch. It was the first time Roseanne had seen anyone tell the Duke of Harkwood what to do, and it was, she thought later, the moment she began to believe the house was survivable. She had broth and bread, and a fire so close to her chair that her wet hem steamed. The broth had barley in it, and a great deal of pepper, and Roseanne ate it too fast, and had to stop and put the spoon down and wait. Mrs. Prentice took the bowl away without a word and brought it back, filled and set it down, and went on with the mending in her lap. Nobody said, "Poor thing." Nobody said how dreadful. In Ledbury there had been 11 separate women who had said how dreadful to her in the space of one September, and every one of them had said it standing in a doorway she was not going to be asked through. Mrs. Prentice sat across from her and darned a stocking, and did not talk. And the not talking was so unlike the sympathy of Ledbury that Roseanne felt her eyes sting and had to look hard at the fire. "Your feet, Mrs. Marba," Prentice said, some while later, without raising her head. "They are quite well. They are not quite well. They have been on stone since 7, and they will hurt like the devil in an hour, and you will want to be sitting down when they do." She bit the thread. "Take the boots off in front of me, and I shall not tell anyone. And you may keep whatever dignity you think is in them." Roseanne took the boots off. The thread had gone through both heels, and her stockings were black with it. And there was a blister on her left heel, the size of a shilling, that she had been walking on for 4 days, without permitting herself to think about. Mrs. Prentice looked at it for a moment. Then she got up and fetched a basin and a kettle, and knelt down on the flags in front of her. 60 years old, in a house with 30 windows, and washed the feet of the pauper girl at the church door without asking her permission or making one single remark about it. He sent for her at 3. The library at Ardennes ran the whole depth of the house, and the shelves went up past the height of a man twice over, and there was a ladder on a brass rail, and the light came in through tall windows, and lay across the floor in long cold bars. He was standing at the far end with his back to her when she came in. He did not turn. The ring was on the desk. He had not put it on. "Sit down," he said. She sat. "Tell me how she looked." Roseanne had expected a great many questions. She had not expected that one. "She was thin," she said. "Her hair had been fair. It was mostly gray. She had a scar on her left hand, across the back of it an old one, like a burn. The Duke's shoulders did not move." "She had lost her boots," Roseanne said. She was not able to say very much. "She said your name, and the hawk, and that she was called Hetty, and that you would not want the ring, and that I was to give it to you anyway." Silence. The fire moved. Out on the lake, distantly, a dog was barking at the heron. "Was she in pain?" he said. "I do not think so. Not at the end. She was very cold. Did she speak of anyone?" "No, your Grace." He turned around then, and Roseanne, who had been braced for anger, was not braced for what was actually on his face, which was nothing at all, held very hard in place by a jaw that was working. 11 days, he said. "You had 140 pounds of gold in your hand for 11 days. And you slept in a doorway?" "Yes." "Why, because I said I would give it to you." He looked at her for a long moment. "Has?" Then he crossed to the desk and put both hands flat on it, and stood there with his head down, and Roseanne saw the back of his neck above his collar, and looked away from it because it seemed a private thing to have seen. "Hetty Marsh was my mother's maid," he said. For 31 years. When my wife died 2 years ago, there was a matter of some jewelry, and a great deal of talk, and my aunt was very certain, and I was not in a condition to be certain of anything at all, and she was turned out of this house in a February without a character." He straightened. "I signed the paper," he said. "I did not read it. I have thought about that every day for 2 years, and I have not once been able to find her, and you have just told me where she was and what her hands looked like at the end of it." He picked up the ring. He did not look at it. "She took nothing," he said. "She was given this by my grandfather when I was 9 years old, for pulling me out of that lake. It is the only thing of any value she ever owned, and she carried it under her tongue rather than sell it, and she sent it back to me." He set it down again. His hand shook once, and he closed it. "Eat something," he said without looking up. "Mrs. Prentice will find you a room." And that was all. He walked out of the library and left her in it with the cold bars of light and the smell of leather and the ring lying on the desk where anyone might have taken it. Roseanne did not take it. She sat quite still, with her heart going hard, and thought about a man who said, "Eat something," when what he meant was something else entirely, and could not say the something else, and had perhaps not been able to say it for 2 years. She stayed. There was no discussion of her staying. There was only Mrs. Prentice saying that the linen wanted counting, and nobody in the house could count past 100 without losing the thread, and Roseanne saying she could, and the linen taking 4 days. There were 411 sheets at Ardennes. 96 of them were past mending, and had been folded back into the presses, year after year, by maids who did not want to be the one to say so. Roseanne said so. She wrote the 96 down on a slate in a column, and carried the slate to the housekeeper's room, and stood there while Mrs. Prentice read it. And Mrs. Prentice read it twice and then laughed, a short surprised bark of a laugh, and said that in 29 years nobody had ever once counted the things they were meant to be ashamed of. After the linen, there were the accounts. The accounts were worse. The steward at Ardennes was an honest man, with an appalling hand, and no head for a column, and the mill rents had been entered in 3 different places since Michaelmas, and reconciled in none of them. Roseanne sat with them for 6 days at the end of the housekeeper's table, with her father's habit of working aloud, murmuring the figures under her breath the way he had murmured his Greek. And at the end of the 6 days, she had found 9 pounds and 11 shillings that belonged to a family at Ledbury Cross, who had paid twice and been too frightened of the great house to mention it. She wrote it out clean and gave it to Mrs. Prentice, and it went where such things go. And 11 days later a man she had never seen came up the avenue in a cart with a sack of walnuts on the seat beside him, and would not give his name, and would not come in, and left the walnuts on the step. After the accounts there was the library itself, which had been catalogued in 1782 and never since, and which Roseanne began on because nobody stopped her, working her way along the low shelves in the mornings with a slate and a candle stub, writing in a hand her father had made her practice until it was better than his. The book smelled of her father's study. That was the difficulty with them. She would take down a Livy and open it and be for one entire second 11 years old, in a room in Ledbury, with a fire and a man in it who thought she was worth teaching, and then she would close it and write the number on the slate and put it back. The Duke's name was Alaric. She learned it from Mrs. Prentice, and never once used it. He came into the library most mornings. He never appeared to be coming in for her. He came in for a book or a letter, or to stand at the window with his coffee going cold in his hand, and he would say 4 words, or 2, or none, and go out again. And yet the fire in the library began to be lit at 7 instead of 10. And a second candlestick appeared on the low table where she worked, which was not the sort of thing a housekeeper does without being told. "Sit nearer the fire," he said one morning from the doorway. "I am quite well, Your Grace." "Your hands are blue. Sit nearer the fire." She moved her slate to the hearth chair. He did not say anything else. He stood at the window for perhaps 2 minutes, and then left, and Roseanne sat with the heat coming up her arms, and a warmth in her face that was not the fire, and told herself with all the discipline she had, that a man of that rank orders the arrangement of his own rooms, and it means nothing whatever about the person sitting in them. Her body did not believe her. Her body had begun some days before to know exactly where he was in a room without looking, the way one knows where the window is. His aunt came on the 2nd of January. Lady Constance Vane was the widow of the Duke's uncle, and she had the management of Ardennes society, and had had it for 11 years. And she came into the house the way a tide comes into a harbor, with her own footmen and her own opinions. She was 62. She had a fan she did not use for air. And with her, arranged at her right hand, came Miss Georgiana Kerr, who was 22 and had £8,000, and a face like a good painting, and had been told since she was 14 that she would be the next Duchess of Harkwood. Roseanne was on the ladder with a candle in her hand when they came into the library. "Good heavens," Lady Constance said, Alaric. "There is a woman on the ladder. Miss Talbot is cataloguing the library with a candle. Among the folios." The fan came up and hovered at a considered height. "And where does Miss Talbot come from? Ledbury?" "Ledbury." Lady Constance turned the word over and put it down again. She looked up at Roseanne on the ladder in the good grey merino. "Mrs. Ceste." Prentice had produced from somewhere, and Roseanne watched a calculation happen behind that face and come out clean. "I know all of Ledbury. There is no Talbot in Ledbury. My father held the living, my lady." "The living." The fan lowered. Something in Lady Constance's shoulders settled comfortably, the way a woman settles when a thing has been placed in the correct drawer at last. "You are the parson's daughter, the one they took up off the church steps at Harkwood." She turned to Miss Kerr and did not lower her voice. "The pauper girl at the church door," she said. "Cataloguing my nephew's folios. I am told the parish gave her bread all November." Roseanne came down the ladder because the alternative was to be spoken about at a height. On the floor she was a head shorter than Lady Constance, and it did not seem to matter as much as she had expected. "They did, my lady," she said. "Mrs. Ellis at the mill gave me bread 11 times. I have written it down, and I mean to pay it back." The fan stopped moving. Across the room, at the window, the Duke of Harkwood had not turned around, and Roseanne, who had learned the back of that coat rather too well, saw his shoulders drop half an inch and could not read it at all. That night at dinner, Lady Constance placed Miss Kerr at his right hand, and Roseanne, without any discussion of the matter, was not at dinner. She ate with Mrs. Prentice in the housekeeper's room, and it was better food and better company. And she was ashamed of how much the arrangement stung. He asked where you were. Mrs. Prentice said, cutting bread. Her ladyship said the schedule was full. It was very reasonable of her. It was not reasonable at all, and you may stop that. Roseanne looked at her hands. "Mrs. Prentice, what am I doing here?" "Counting linen, apparently." The old woman set down the knife. 29 years I have been in this house. That man's father did not look at his own wife the way he looks at the back of your head when you are on that ladder. And if you tell him I said so, I shall deny it in front of the vicar." "He has not," Roseanne said. Her voice had gone strange. "He has not said one word." "No," Mrs. Prentice said. "He has not. He signed a paper without reading it. Once, and it cost a woman 31 years. And her life. You will forgive him, I hope, for being slow about paper now." She stayed on the ladder. She stayed because the work was real and because Mrs. Prentice needed the accounts, and because Hetty was to be buried at Ardennes in the family ground rather than the tannery lane, and the Duke had said so in 4 words, and Roseanne had gone out in the frost to watch the sexton mark the plot, and had found, standing at the yew with his hat in his hand, he was not weeping. He was standing quite still with his hat in his hand in a January wind that must have gone through him like a knife. And he stayed there for an hour, and Roseanne stood in the shadow of the wall for the whole of it, and did not go to him because there was nothing on earth she had the standing to say. She saw his shoulders once, only once. That was enough. Miss Kerr found her in the morning room on the 9th. "You must not mind, Lady Constance," she said, sitting down without being asked, arranging her skirts. She had a low, pleasant voice, and there was no cruelty in her at all, which was somehow worse. She is only very fond of him. We are all very fond of him. I do not mind her, Miss Kerr. Everyone minds her. A small laugh. Then the pause, delicately placed. Miss Talbot, you have been kind to him. I do not think anyone else has been able to be. You will let me say one thing, though, because I think nobody else will say it, and you ought to hear it from a person who does not wish you ill. Roseanne waited. The parish talks, Miss Kerr said gently. Harkwood talks. Ledbury talks. The pauper girl at the church door has been living in a duke's house for a month, and they are not saying she is cataloguing folios. They are saying the other thing, and it will not touch him. It never touches them. It only ever touches us. She stood up. She really was very kind. That was the whole difficulty. I am sorry to be the one, she said. I did not want you to hear it in a shop. She left. Roseanne sat in the morning room with the sun coming in on the carpet and understood, with a clarity that felt like cold water, that every hour she stayed at Ardennes, she was spending something that was not hers. She went to find Mrs. Broffin. Prentice. She got as far as the passage, and in the passage through the half-open door of the small drawing-room, she heard Lady Constance's voice pitched exactly loud enough. The parson's daughter is with child, or she will be, or the county will say she is, which is precisely the same thing. Alaric, I am not a cruel woman. I am asking you to write her a character, and give her £20 and send her to a school in Bath where she may be of some use. It is more than kind. It is more than she would get anywhere else in England. No, then I shall do it myself, and you will be angry with me for a month, and grateful to me for the rest of your life. Roseanne did not stay for his answer. She went up the back stairs with her ears roaring, and she sat on the edge of the bed in a room that was not hers, in a dress that was not hers, and she thought about £32, and a woman with a scar on her hand, and a promise kept for 11 days on a set of frozen steps. And she thought, I have been given a great deal here, and I have not paid for any of it, and there is exactly one thing in this house that is mine to give back. The Harkwood Assembly was held on the 20th of January in the long room over the Ledbury Inn, and it was the only night of the year when the county and the parish stood on the same floor. Lady Constance had arranged it for 11 years. She had arranged this one particularly. Roseanne was not invited. She went anyway, on foot, in the twice-dyed grey gown, with the mended boots under it and her father's small, worn Latin Testament in her pocket, because the thing she had come to do required that everyone see exactly what she was while she did it. She came up the stairs at 9 o'clock into 200 candles and an orchestra, and the smell of hot wax and orange peel, and the room turned to look at her the way a field of sheep turns, all at once and without hurry. Lady Constance came through the crowd like a ship. You will leave, she said now, and quietly, and I shall say you were never here. I have come to say one thing, my lady, and then I shall go and I shall not come back. You have come to be looked at. Yes, Roseanne said. I have. She had never in her life spoken so loudly in a room. Her hands were shaking so badly, she had to hold them together in front of her. The orchestra had stopped. 200 faces, Mrs. Fenwick's, near the front arranged already into the shape of the story she would tell tomorrow. Miss Kerr's by the window, white and not unkind. And at the far end, by the terrace doors, a stillness in a dark blue coat. You have all been told what I am, Roseanne said. The pauper girl at the church door. I have heard it said in the churchyard, and I have heard it said in that house, and I have heard it said in a shop in Ledbury, by a woman who did not know I was behind the flower. It is nearly true. My father was the parson at Ledbury for 19 years, and he died owing £70, and there is £32 of it standing yet, and I have no house, and no fortune, and no expectation of either. Nobody moved. I have been 6 weeks at Ardennes. I have counted the linen, and I have catalogued 460 volumes, and I have been paid nothing, because I did not ask, and I want the county to hear me say that the Duke of Harkwood has not laid a finger on me nor spoken one word to me that he would not have spoken in front of his mother. "This is monstrous," Lady Constance said. "Somebody remove her." "I am removing myself, my lady. That is what I came to do." Roseanne turned back to the room. Her voice had steadied, and she did not know why. "There was a woman called Hetty who served this family for 31 years and died in a lane behind the tannery in December with her boots gone. I sat with her. She had a ring in her mouth. She would not sell. I do not ask you to think better of me. I ask you to think of her because you will not, and somebody in this county ought to. That is all. I am going tonight." She turned to go. And the room, which had not made a sound, made one. The small, collective intake of 200 people watching a man cross a floor. He came through them in 6 strides. He did not go around Lady Constance. He went past her closely enough that her fan came down, and he stopped in front of Roseanne with the whole assembly at his back, and he was not composed at all. His breathing was wrong. The scar at his mouth was white. "Roseanne," he said, her given name in his voice. For the first time, she looked up at him and could not speak. He turned. He looked at the room, and the room looked back, and Lady Constance said, "Alaric," in a voice that had a crack straight through the middle of it. "Miss Talbot is my betrothed. Say it in the shops." Nothing. The candles hissed. Somewhere at the back, a woman said, "Oh," quite distinctly, and put her hand over her mouth. Lady Constance's fan was hanging from her wrist. She looked at her nephew, and then at Roseanne, and then, unforgivably, at the mended boots below the twice-dyed hem, and Roseanne watched the whole architecture of 11 years come down behind that face, in the space of 3 seconds. "You cannot," she said. "You have not thought." "I have thought of very little else since the 4th Sunday of Advent." He said it quietly, and it carried, because the room was silent enough to carry a pin. "I signed a paper once without reading it, Aunt. I am not going to make the other mistake." Mr. Renfield, the family's solicitor, was standing by the card tables, because Lady Constance had invited him to discuss the Bath School. He set down his glass, and he came forward, and he said in the flat carrying voice of a man who has been waiting 20 years to be useful in public, "His Grace instructed me on Thursday to draw the settlement. It is drawn. Miss Talbot's father's debts are discharged as of the 14th. Roseanne turned her head. "The 14th?" she said. "You would not have let me," the Duke said. "You would have stood in that room and told me it was not mine to pay. It was £32. I have paid more than that for a horse I did not like." And Miss Kerr, by the window, did a thing that Roseanne never afterward forgot. She began, alone, in that enormous silence, to applaud. Twice. Just twice, and lightly with her gloves on, looking directly at Lady Constance while she did it. The room came apart into noise. They walked out through it. He did not take her arm until they were on the stairs. And then he did, and his hand was shaking, and Roseanne put her cold fingers over it, and they stood on the landing of the Ledbury Inn for a moment, with 200 people, talking on the other side of the wall. "You said nothing for 6 weeks," she said. "I had nothing to offer you that was not an insult. A woman with no money in my house. Whatever I said, you would have had to say yes to it." He looked down at her. "You settled that tonight in front of the entire county. You made it impossible for anyone ever to say you had been bought. I did not do it for that. I know what you did it for." His hand turned under hers and closed. "You did it for a maid. You knew for 1 hour. You have been doing that since December, and I have watched you do it every day, and I have been the coward at the window." He lifted his other hand. He stopped. It hung in the air between them, 2 inches from her face, and Roseanne felt her whole body lean into that 2 inches without any permission from her at all. "I am going to ask you a question," he said, "and I want you to understand that you may say no. And the settlement stands, and the debt stays paid, and you go where you like with my carriage and my money and my name behind you regardless. Ask me, do you want me?" His voice had gone rough. "Not the house, not the safety, not gratitude. I have had a great deal of gratitude, and it is a cold thing to be married to. Do you want me?" The candle on the landing guttered. Downstairs, the orchestra had started again, badly, because the players were still looking at the door. "I knew where you were in every room in that house," Roseanne said. "For 6 weeks without looking. I could not make myself stop." His hand came the last 2 inches and his palm was against her jaw, and neither of them moved. And it was the not moving that undid her. Both of them stopped there on the stairs of a public inn, one breath from the thing, because he would not take it and she would not take it, and they both knew that the next hour would decide the rest of it. "Not here," he said against her hair. "Not in a place where they can watch, no," she agreed. He kissed her at the door of Ardennes, in the dark, in the cold, with the carriage lamps still burning behind them. And it was soft, and it was full of promise. And it took a very long time. They were married in March at St. Anselm's. In Harkwood, the parish came. The parish came in numbers that made the verger open the north door. And Mrs. Ellis from the mill sat in the third pew, because Roseanne had walked to the mill in February with 11 loaves worth of shillings, and had been refused, and had left them on the counter anyway. Mrs. Fenwick sat at the back, and told everyone within reach that she had always said there was something out of the common in that girl. Lady Constance did not come. She wrote, in April from Bath, a letter of 9 lines that Roseanne read twice, and put away without showing anyone, in which the words, "My dear niece," appeared once crossed out, and written again. Miss Kerr came, and stood up with Roseanne, and married a physician in Bristol the following autumn, for no money whatever, and, by all accounts, was extremely happy. There is a stone in the family ground at Ardennes. Small, set a little apart under the yew, and it says, Hetty Marsh, 31 years of this house, and the word beloved, and nothing else at all. On the first evening of December, a year on, there was snow at Ardennes. It came down out of a yellow sky in the last of the light, and lay on the lime avenue, and on the roof of the boathouse, and on the reeds where the herons stood, and inside, in the library. The fire had been lit at 4. Roseanne sat on the low chair by the hearth, with the ledger of the mill accounts open on her knee. Her boots, which were good ones now, and which she had never quite got used to, were up on the fender. Across the room, her husband stood at the tall window with his coffee going cold in his hand, watching the snow come down on the water, and he was not stiff, and his hands were quiet. On the desk between them where he had put it on the day of the wedding, and where it had stayed, the ring lay in a small dish of white china with the hawk turned up. He had never put it on. She had never asked him to. "Come away from the window," she said. "You are perished." He turned. The scar at his mouth pulled, very slightly, the way it did now, which was a thing perhaps 4 people in England had ever seen. He came away from the window. Thank you for staying to the end of this one. If Roseanne's 11 days on the steps stayed with you, that is exactly where the story began. And it is enough to leave it there in the firelight, with the snow coming down, and the ring in its dish and nobody in that room needing to say another word.